43. The Civil Revolution, Part 1. The Council of Constance met 1414 to 1418, supposedly to reform the Church. In reality, it ensured the corruption of the Church until well after the Reformation. The Emperor Sigismund, who controlled the council, was himself a man very much in need of reform. What kings and emperors wanted least of all was a strong church. They preferred a weak and corrupt church as a means of ensuring their own power. The realm of the Vatican progressively became administration, architecture, art, and, in time, the Papal States. It was easier for the popes to be heads of state than of a church which threatened kings with moral ultimatums. An Erastian Europe was in the making, one in which the state controlled the church within its domain. In England, in 1514 to 1515, the people of London demonstrated against the church because of the murder in the bishop's prison at St. Paul's of Richard Hunn, held as a heretic. Parliament then attacked benefit of clergy somewhat later. Charles VIII, Louis XII, and other French monarchs were champions of a Gallican church, one controlled by them, not the Vatican. Philip II of Spain was in constant conflict with the popes, and the Catholics of Spain were not permitted an appeal to the Pope against the king or against the king's Inquisition. Earlier, Ferdinand and Isabella had been vigorous Erastians. Maximilian I, 1459 to 1519, hoped to gain the papal throne after the death of the Pope or by deposing him. All these men seized church properties and wealth when it suited them. These were, quote, good Catholics, end quote, who did as much harm to the church as Henry VIII. Thomas More, a good Catholic, later made a saint, counselled Henry VIII to take the very steps he later opposed. A strong argument could be made for the fact that the Reformation saved Christendom and preserved the Roman Catholic Church. This is not to say that the dismantling of Christendom did not continue with vigour. The various rulers were determined that society be civil in its foundation rather than theological. The crown lawyers were everywhere busy establishing new legal premises for society. The Reformation and then the Counter-Reformation created a counterforce to the civil revolution underway. But the foundations were shifting. Charles Baudelaire, in his Salon of 1846, wrote, "The critic should arm himself from the start with a sure criterion drawn from nature, and should then carry out his duty with a passion. For a critic does not cease to be a man, and passion draws similar temperaments together and exalts the reason to fresh heights." This is a curious and important statement. Baudelaire's sure criterion came not from God, but from nature, and the critic's great asset for him was that he was a man, that is, natural. The Renaissance was deeply concerned about tradition, but not Christian tradition, but that of pagan antiquity. Lorenzo Ghiberti showed a hint of restraints at the triumph of Christianity. Art began to lose its supernatural framework and reference, and increasingly in Renaissance art, there is no reference beyond what we see. The sure criterion, whether in art, religion, or politics, was steadily becoming nature rather than God and his revealed law word. The state, as man's natural order, came into its own as an end in itself. It was less and less, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, or justice, Matthew chapter 6, verse 33, but steadily, seek ye first the political kingdom as the basic life and order for man. The civil revolution gave life a new focus, the state. Man began to see himself as a political animal rather than as a creature of God. In the Dictionary of Sociology, 1944, Matthias Smith has two very interesting definitions of man which tell us much about our 20th century world. Man no longer sees himself sharply and clearly in terms of God as a creature made in his image. Rather, quote, science, end quote, has taught him to think of himself naturalistically. According to Smith, man, 1, the human species in general as distinguished from subhuman organisms, Homo sapiens. 2, an adult male member of the human species, man, marginal. In the broadest sense, a person who is not a fully participating member of a social group. Most marginal persons are marginal to 2 or more groups, as is true of partially assimilated immigrants. The roots of this shift from Christian man to civil man are in the adoption of Aristotle's thought by the medieval church. In terms of Aristotle, Aquinas held, man is a social animal. Man is properly that which he is according to reason, and nature has given man the beginnings of the satisfaction of his wants in giving him reason and a pair of hands, but not complete satisfaction as to other animals to whom she has given in sufficiency clothing and food. There is much more to Aquinas than this, but there is too much of this. What can we say of Aquinas' statement that nature has given man reason, etc.? If nature gave man his being, we can only have a naturalistic moral and social order. But if God has given man every atom of his being and is the maker of all things, then we have a mandate for a God-ordained order according to his law word. The Westminster Shorter Catechism, question 10, asks, how did God create man? And answers, God created man, male and female, after his image, in knowledge, righteousness, and holiness, with dominion over the creatures, Genesis chapter 1 verses 26 to 28, Colossians chapter 3 verse 10, Ephesians chapter 4 verse 24. The entrance of Greek views of man and his being into medieval philosophy and civil polity led to a new way of thinking in church and state. The result was the Civil Revolution, a revival of paganism in which man's defining order was now the state rather than the triune God. With this civil revolution, the centre of society shifted from church to state, from theology to politics, and from the kingdom of God to the various kingdoms of man. Reasons of state now began to provide the new morality, because morality is man's relationship to reality. If the ruler of civil society is the reality, then, as Machiavelli and Castiglione saw, we align ourselves to that ruler as our moral and realistic duty. In such a society, God's law becomes unrealistic morality. If, however, the God of Scripture is the living God, then civil morality is fallaciousness, and civil man and the state are under judgment and reprobation. The civil revolution is thus to unreality and death